Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope everyone is doing well. Eid Mubarak to everyone. Today is the second day of Eid in United Kingdom and pretty much in the whole world, as probably for the first time in my living memory, this is probably when we had one Eid anywhere and everywhere across the world. There were obviously some minor communities and distinctions in some of the localities and locales across the world, but generally, this was the Eid that was celebrated all across the world. So, Alhamdulillah, it's uh, it's a great feeling that after the whole month of Ramadan and all the fasting that is done by the communities across the world and all the effort that is put in during the month of Ramadan, that Eid came in, everyone celebrated it across the world, and people were able to enjoy the great blessings of the month of Shawwal or start of the Shawwal in the form of the Eid al-Fitr. Obviously, I think across the world in many different domains and in many different shapes and form, things are not ideal. As we all know, in many locations across the world, things always keep on becoming more and more challenging in some way or form. And the latest example is obviously the conflict happening at the moment in Middle East, and the nature of this conflict in that regard, that it is creating such misery for the ordinary humans living in Gaza, and in that regard. So I think it's quite substantially important for all of us to reflect on these events, understand the context and the basis of why these things are happening across in the region, and then collectively work towards finding a solution. And we should all be aiming for finding a solution for this human tragedy. It's imperious for anyone and everyone across the world to raise their voice, to add their voice, and to add their thoughts around this topic, because this is such an important issue that is obviously not just an issue for it is obviously not just an issue for, call it, anyone who's from a specific faith, if you want to think about it in this manner. But this is a collective and a combined issue that is for anyone and everyone across the whole world. So I would definitely think that this is something that everyone should be raising a voice for, and this is something that everyone should have a concern about in some way or form. And if people are not concerned or people are unable to show any concern, then obviously it is a challenge. It is something that we need to, and we need to kind of come up with an address to resolve for it in some way or form. So again, that's kind of one major issue at this point in time. I think that we are seeing across the world in some way or form. This is a recurring issue. The scenes coming in from Gaza, quite remarkable. I think you can see the bombing that is taking place, the destruction that has been happening in there, and the loss of lives. It's gone beyond 120 odd people that have lost their voice, their lives recently. And I think this is, again, there's a lot of noise across the world. You can see that many of the Muslim majority countries, as well as the other countries, obviously held demonstrations across the world for stopping this nonsensical violence that is taking place. And more people across the world are raising their slogans and voices for this purpose. So this is not going to go away so easily. This is a concern that everyone is having. And again, the scale of this conflict and the situation that is in a way raising and kind of creating all the suspicion. It's a remarkable. I think it's something that that is unprecedented in a way that many people feel that this is something that many people believe that shouldn't be happening in the modern day and time, as we are in a scenario that many of the principal nations across the world raise their voices about human rights abuses, they raise their voices about civilian casualties and deaths. But this is quite a remarkable issue that not many people seems to be raising any major concerns about it. And I think this is definitely something that we should all raise our voices for, and a change should be brought in that regard. Closer to home, I think in a way more effectively closer to UK. Last week, obviously, many things were happening, many things that are obviously being kind of considered, and the discussions that are being held recently. One of the biggest things was obviously the election of the Mayor of London. Sadiq Khan eventually emerged as the winner. He won the second consecutive victory as the Mayor of London, and he received roughly about 55% of the total vote in this regard, which is quite a remarkable number if you think about it, that he's technically increased his majority as he had previously. Sean Bailey, who was the Conservative candidate, only ended up at roughly about 977,000 votes compared to the 1.2 million that Sadiq Khan obviously received in that regard. So it's quite obviously, I think, not a major difference in terms of, as you would imagine, the Mayor of London obviously is a very strong presence on the stage or the politics of UK and beyond. So this is something that, again, I think we should think about, and how people progress against these notions. And if there is a figurehead that is elected as the Mayor of London, what are the expectations against that figurehead, and what kind of representation he provides for London in totality? So this is, again, something which is quite important and remarkable in that regard. And a win for Sadiq Khan hopefully brings in a certain degree of betterment, if at all possible, going forward as well. Over in the US, I think one of the major announcements that took place this week was the announcement of the kind of taking off the masks internally. So obviously the whole situation hasn't changed in terms of coronavirus on a massive scale, but there are certain restrictions being lifted across the world now. In US, they've lifted the restriction of wearing masks indoor. In UK, we know from the 17th of May, many travel destinations are going to be introduced. The green list countries, as they are known, Portugal and some of the other ones. And some of the more extreme measures across Europe and beyond are also being lifted now, in that instance that people are able to move around and people are go back to a certain degree of normality if they are able to beyond that in that instance. So it's definitely a good thing. I think it seems and it feels like that more and more the kind of more and more changes that people were originally envisioning were going to be later in the year is now basically happening, and in a way becoming better. In a way, I think in a way they are improving the lifestyle of people all across the world. So this is a good thing. I think any restrictions that are lifted, any changes that are brought in to make life easier for people or bring it back to a certain degree of normality as much as possible is a sign that the virus in its form is somewhat receding in its the rate it was infecting people, the way it was making people to go into hospitals, or the way people were losing their lives against this virus as well. So we all hope and pray that things continue to improve, that things continue to get better. And obviously, I think in that regard, this becomes more of an issue of managing that change rather than the situation that we've had previously, where obviously this has been quite a major piece of concern for people in the whole world, and especially I think we've seen things the way they happened in India, and obviously we know that it's been quite a major point of concern for many of the countries, many of the obviously globally it's been a very, very tough time in any way or form. So we hope and pray that inshallah that it improves in the going forward. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Beyond that, I think just a quick more things that are happening. Quite interestingly, this week was one of the major stories that happened, and this is obviously a reflection of things to come, if at all possible. That one of the major fuel pipelines in United States were hacked by hackers, and it was so interesting in that regard that because the pipeline network was dependent on the connections or the systems that it was operating against, and the main core system in a way was hacked by hackers, and hence the company Colonial, as it is known, which carries this 5,500-mile pipeline. It carries a massive amount of oil on a daily basis, 2.5 million barrels a day. It was hacked. It was in a way closed down, and many of the country's locations were unable to get any access to fuel. So even prices at the petrol pump really skyrocketed. If you imagine that price per gallon reached up to $3, essentially 2.14 pounds a gallon in that instance. And this is a price that hasn't been there since 2014, when we originally saw the oil price really shoot up. So this is a very, very odd moment in time, in a way, that infrastructure attacks by the kind of hackers and then getting ransom for their hacking as well is quite a major concern for many governments across the world. So how it shapes up and what kind of impact it has in the long term is yet to be seen. But this is quite a stark reminder of why and how the internet systems and the dependency of many daily life items are now completely linked to the issues with the internet, and how anyone can actually hack the systems and really create any degree of activity on the back of it as well. More so, I think on the coronavirus front, many things are in a way opening up. So this in a way seems to be that Greece has now started to lift the measures around lockdowns. People are in a way encouraged back to start traveling into Greece. And Greece is obviously dependent on tourism, as you would imagine, that this is one of the countries that is purely dependent on tourism. And when Greece was closed, it caused a massive disruption to the whole degree of tourism industry, as well as the economy of Greece. And in this manner or form, I think it's going to be interesting how things shape up. But even in UK, I think one thing that Boris Johnson has been quite firm about is that the variants, especially the Indian variant as it is known, that really in a way progresses at a very higher rate as compared to the normal coronavirus variant that we've seen previously. Seems to be that there are concerns that if international travel and overseas destinations are opened up fairly soon, then any new variant can come in and really disrupt the plans of UK reopening or becoming back to a certain degree of normal by the 21st of June. So if there are going to be any other variants coming through, or if there are going to be more concerns, then obviously we're going to see some degree of control measures being introduced, whether it is a softer lockdown, whether it is any control mechanisms of people traveling within the country or outside the country or coming inside the country, or very, in a way, strict measures around quarantine or other elements coming into play as well. So that was some quick updates from us today. I think just a very brief roundup of a few of the activity. It's only the second day of Eid, as I was mentioning at the beginning. So we are still settling back into a rhythm of things as we used to before. And I think today we just keep it very short and simple in that regard. And hopefully in the coming days, we'll get back to our normal rhythm of tafsir, tafhim al-Quran, discussions about books, discussions around the world, and then obviously inviting a number of guests to come and feature with us as well. So Jazakallah khair for watching for today, and inshallah we'll continue in our normal pattern from tomorrow onwards. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.